Tina and Georgie, thank you so much for coming on the Mindful Parenting podcast. I'm so happy you're here.
Thank you
Thank
so much for
you.
having us.
Yeah, so thrilled to be here. Thanks,
All
Hunter.
right. So you guys collaborated on this book, The Way of Play. I'm curious about, I have my own thoughts about what's going on in terms of play. It seems like kids aren't getting enough free play. There seems like there's a lot of too much structure, where kids aren't having like the hours of free time that they need. They've said that there's some study that said that kids in England have less time outside than, convicted felons are required to have by law, which is incredibly sad. So there's like outdoor play, there's some free play, there's a lack of that. You guys chose to write this book, The Way of Play. Why right now? What is about right now says it's needed?
I think, there are a lot of books out there about free unstructured play and the need for it and all the incredible benefits that come from it. It's children's first language, all of these things. But there was really only one book that we knew of that really told parents how to play, what to do. And so here's the thing, kind of the way we sort of talked about this book from the very beginning was, particularly post-COVID, mental health, although mental health challenges were rising before COVID hit, they've gotten worse since COVID. And so we're talking about mental health challenges for grown-ups and for kids. And life is completely overstimulating for most kids. Too much screen time, not enough play time, higher academic demands. So basically, you think about like risk factors and protective factors, a lot of risk factors. One of the best protective factors is play. The thing is, though, so kids aren't getting enough of it, but kids really want to play with their parents. And even educated, intentional parents will often say to us like, okay, well, so I'll sit on the floor, but then what? What do I do with them? Or I find it, and this was true for me at times too with my 3 boys, I find it so mind-numbingly boring, I can't stand doing it. I don't like doing it. Or my kid tells me I'm doing it wrong. So it's not pleasant. It's not fun for me. And my kid can tell it's not fun for me. And I feel like I have to do it for hours and hours and hours. And so this book was really, Georgie had kind of like talked about like, how do we create some curriculum for parents around teaching them these things and the importance and benefits of us playing with our kids, and just some basic strategies and how it helps them not only process stress, process what's happening internally, what they're working through, what they're trying on, but it's also so protective in terms of building skills for the future, all the things we want for our kids, like social and emotional intelligence and emotional regulation and impulse control and all of these things, but they don't know how to do it. So let's write a curriculum. So I was like, all right, send me what you kind of are thinking about. And when she sent it to me, I was like, this is a book. We have to get this to more people. So the book is really 7 strategies for how to play with our kids, child-led, in ways that can even be in small chunks, like even a minute. Some of these strategies can be done in less than a minute. Build the relationship with our child, help us know our child at a much deeper level, help them build skills, and then help them process some of the stuff that's challenging for them. So that's why. That's the why.
Yeah, you said that so beautifully, Tina. The number one thing that I've heard, and I know Tina has heard from parents as well, especially in the last couple of years, is how do I do this? I know the benefits of play. I've read all the articles. I've read all the books. They're telling me that play is one of the most important things that I can do from the time that my kid is little all the way through like adolescent, being into college age or getting your first job and all of those things. It's really important that we continue to play. It becomes our best form of self-care, especially when we're parenting our kids and we just feel like there's never enough time for us as well. So parents are like, I know I need to do it, but I don't have any resource for break it down in simple steps that I can just learn really quickly. And I think I love the way the book has turned out because you can open it to any page and you're not only going to get information that's broken down, just really simple, easy to just grok and make sense of really quick and start using. You can even have the book like open next to you as your kid is just bringing you stuff endlessly and saying, hey, Mom, Dad, will you play with me? And the pictures, like the illustrations that have been put into this book are just really bring it all to life in a way that really inspires parents. And parents will tell me, nobody's seen the book yet, but parents will tell me when they've learned some of the 7 strategies, they go, oh gosh, I wish I would have known this when my kid was younger, or, is it too late for me to start using this? And it's literally never too late. Like you can use this with your little, your 2-year-old that's toddling around all the way up through your teenager, making little moments together that they're going to remember forever. And the skills that you can build are just like tremendously useful, whether we're talking about building emotional skills for life or whether we're talking about, being a harried parent trying to, respond to your kid in the moment and stay calm and do all the things that you're supposed to do and not flip out on them as they're flipping out on you, but just being able to respond more creatively and flexibly than maybe you ever thought you could before. I think that comes out of the pages too. So I'm just excited for people to have this as a resource.
Yeah, I mean, I agree. It's like a kind of a manual in some ways on playfulness, like a way to be very, very playful and connecting and all of those benefits of connecting. My worry is that parents are like, oh my God, I'm working full time. I'm like getting all the things done now. Maybe we should just like address that question right away. Like you were saying a minute, but like how much time, if you have a kid you're wanting to connect with, you want to do some play with, but like, yeah, you hate playing. I hated Candyland. God, you could just shoot me if someone put me in front of Candyland.
Chutes and Ladders is the one I hated the most.
And so like, can we like give parents an amount of time that is like an acceptable amount of time for like playing with your kid when it really is not comfortable at all?
Yes, I think I can like jump in with both feet and say that we're really not advocating for parents to put everything else away and just spend hours and hours playing with your kid. Because what happens is you start to feel drained really quickly. And what we want to teach, what we want to impart to kids as we're playing with them, as it jumps out of the pages of the book, like it really only takes a couple of seconds. Like say your 5-year-old comes over to you and says, I want to build with blocks, or you have a 10-year-old that really likes, building like car tracks around the living room or something. These are opportunities. We just want parents to be able to see more coming out of what their kids are learning and how they're developing and get into their world. And so sometimes it's just about understanding what your child is getting out of it in a new way that really enlivens your position to come alongside just for, it could be 10 seconds, it could be 2 minutes, it could be that your child is the type of player that really wants you to be with them and hang out with them for 15, 20 minutes. And then you've got other things to do with the rest of the afternoon. And you find the afternoon goes so much smoother for some reason. They've gotten their cup filled, or they feel like I've got my dose of connection for the day, or I can't even tell why. I just feel better and I feel more like cooperating and doing all the rest of the things. Like we can't promise perfect kids or perfect results or anything, but we have noticed families say, wow, it feels like compared to the time that I put in to what we're getting back, it's just making such a difference for us. So speaking from the Play Strong Institute, I could say like it is making a difference, and it doesn't have to take hours and hours at all.
Hunter, I would say too that the timing of when we do it can matter a lot too. So anytime we have a separation from our child, and separations are obviously when they are at school or daycare and we're at work. But separations are also, if we go out with a friend and then we come back home, sleeping is going to sleep and then waking up that's a separation. If we can have in mind, like just as a general kind of starting point, 15 minutes. Set 15 minutes on your timer on your phone. 10, 15, 20 minutes. Especially if we can do it before or after separations, it has a lot of power. And the strategies that we're really going to be advocating, and of course we can get into them, require us to really be present. And so those 15 minutes really count because we're fully present. They feel like my parent really sees me. They're really with me. And I would even argue that when we're really present, even for very brief periods of time, what's happening is a right brain to right brain synchrony and resonance that's happening. And the other thing too, I would think about with the timing, like obviously, it depends. If you have more time and you're enjoying it, great, stick with it. If you're noticing that you're really not enjoying it, our children pick that up. And so I would say, don't be like, okay, well, it's not been 15 minutes, but I'm miserable, so I'm going to sit here. I think related to that, one of the things I've been talking a lot about the book is, one of my areas of passion and expertise is in attachment science, is that, when we talk about attachment and having a child having a secure attachment with at least one caregiver, we're often thinking about like when your child is in distress, that's when this attachment system is most activated. And that's when they really need us to help them feel connected and protected. And that is absolutely true. But there's a whole other side of attachment that sometimes gets left out of the conversation. And that is the phrase that comes from the research of mutual delight. And I think this is a tool, like oftentimes people are asking me like, how does this book fit in with your other books? You know, how does it fit in with Whole Brain and No Drama and The Power of Showing Up and The Guest Brain and all these things? And I'm like, this book is a vehicle or a tool to integrate the brain, to have fewer discipline problems, to build attachment, to help the brain build in the most optimal ways. Because what happens is if we're playing with them and we're enjoying it and they sense that, and of course they do, that feeling of mutual delight fills our cups as well as theirs, and it's such an important piece of attachment as well.
Yeah, it's like you're putting those deposits in that emotional bank account, right? Like too often we're trying to withdraw, and we got to put those deposits in. And this book is like a great way to put those deposits in. And you're right, like all of the strategies you talk about are really strategies of mindfulness. Like they're paying attention. It's like your child is the object of your mindfulness, right? You're noticing when you're distracted, and you're bringing this attitude of curiosity and non-judgment into the situation, trying to wonder why, all of these things. I really love it. Okay, so it's making our kids more cooperative to play with them. This is amazing. This is good stuff. All right, so let's get into some of the strategies. You talk about the first strategy is so interesting because it's a strategy that we talk about a lot here, right? Like you talk about, well, what Dr. Dan Siegel said, like name it to tame it, right? This is in the kind of negative sort of context. When something's challenging, we name it, we acknowledge it to kind of give it some relief. And you talk about this as a strategy of thinking out loud. So can you tell us about that and what that does for kids?
Yeah, I can start off by saying this first strategy, Think Out Loud, is 100% inspired by everything that I've learned with Tina over the last 10 years. The concept of how do you get a parent to become more attuned with their child. For parents who want to do that, they're trying to find ways to really tune in to what kids are talking about, what they're explaining from school, why they're annoyed with their brother or sister. All of these things, we're trying to attune to our kids and figure out what's really going on inside their minds so that I can best meet them with what they're struggling with, right? And so there's this idea in, at least I'm a play therapist, so in the play therapy world, if you want to begin to get to know what's going on in a child's mind, you play with them by reflecting out loud on what they're playing. And the early childhood community already knows this as like parallel talk or, sports casting. You probably heard those terms. It's amazing how all the science is like infused together. So everybody kind of knows this is sort of where you start with kids, but nobody really knows why. And I would love to hear from Tina in just a second, like explain to us a little bit more about what's going on sort of at the brain mind level and between your two minds, between parent and child, as we're thinking out loud with our kids. But the step is basically, first you start out by observing and attuning. So that goes back to the attunement that we're talking about, that even in brain scans, you can see the same parts of the brain lighting up in the adult and the kid at the same time. It's like, oh my gosh, we're really starting to like mirror each other and truly like have a felt connection with one another when we just speak to what we think that your child might be doing and the reason they might be doing it. So it's really speaking to your child's intention. And so let's say they decide to pile some blocks up and it looks like there's a bit of a decline and there's a car on top. You're just going to say, it looks like you're building a ramp. I wonder if that's right, right? So kids start to look at their parent and they go, how did you know that? How do you now know sort of what's going on with me? It's not just about saying what you think they're doing. It's about guessing at what the content of their mind might be in that moment. And you can get it wrong plenty of times and your kid will probably just correct you. They love doing that anyway. But if you get it right a few times, kids start to go, ooh, it's like you're reading my mind. You're kind of good at this now. And it builds up a parent's sense of competence with their kid. And it can also help, set them up for more success when things start to get a little bit, real, when you're just trying to get other things done and it's a family situation where you've got to respond and your kid needs you to show up in a particular way. It's sort of a set of preventative steps so that we're building your child's skill of reflection. But I really want to hear what Tina says about
I
this
just
one
want
too.
to, for the listener, the parent, I kind of what you were saying is this strategy is state the obvious, right?
Yes.
Like just state what's going on. Okay. So that seems pretty simple. Yes. Tina,
Yeah.
please
So
tell us
it
what's
is,
happening in the brain.
It's like sportscasting, but it's beyond sportscasting. You know, sportscasters are describing exactly what's going on, and we're doing that. We're like, oh, it looks like you're building a ramp, or wow, that car's going really high up in a, you know, at a big angle. But what we're doing, in addition to just naming exactly what we're seeing, is we're also narrating or thinking out loud about their intentions or what they could be doing, their planning. So we're really tuning into not just the behavior we're seeing, but the mind that we're seeing behind the behavior. So that's what we're doing. Now, here's what's really interesting. I learned this piece from Dan Siegel, my co-author on my first 4 books, is that when you really peel back the layers of what emotional connection truly is it's shared attention. And so if your kid is building a ramp with blocks and you bring your attention to what they're doing and what they're thinking about as they're doing that, that is really the heart of emotional connection and intimacy. So that's really what's happening in that moment. And then there's so much implicit information that's getting communicated, including, like Georgie was saying, like, how did you know that? What the child then experiences implicitly, and especially as it gets repeated over time, is my parent sees me, they know my mind, they can see kind of that there's something predictable happening, and that's a cue. Anything predictable in the brain is a cue of safety. So this kind of tuning in and resonance that's happening is right brain to right brain synchrony, just like we see between therapist and client, or between lovers, or between a parent-child dyad that's close, is that we're really joining with them and our brains really are mirroring each other. But what this does too is it gives our children, and this is true for many of the strategies, it gives them vocabulary and words and ways to communicate that are matching with their mind, their motor activity, their motor planning, all of these things. So we're really scaffolding in a lot of language and a lot of skill building about understanding their own mind as well.
That's so cool. And that whole, it's so interesting because now as I'm listening to this, you know, you guys know I have a 14-year-old and a 17-year-old, and now it's like kind of like I'm understanding, especially the converse of that, like this shared attention piece, you know, that is why then the phone becomes especially insidious, because you can't, such a solitary withdrawing thing. It's not anything that you can share attention with. There's no mirroring or anything that's happening there. Okay.
I told a parent yesterday. I told a parent yesterday on a live parent community thing I was doing yesterday. I had a mom who said, my kid only is really interested in his screen. Like, I don't know how to do that. And I said, well, first of all, we want to scaffold beyond that. We want to help him find some other things to light up. And if we're talking about preteens and teens, this is true for them as much as it is for little kids, is they often do love to surprise people or prank people. Like, be like, oh, let's surprise so-and-so. Let's make them some muffins tonight. Will you help me make them? You know, or hey, I need your help with something. And then you're working on something together, not with eye contact, better with teenagers to be side by side. But if your kid is really lit up about their device, be like, show me the funniest meme or video you've seen this week. Or you go look up, like, what's a hilarious goat screaming video, right? Goat screaming videos are hilarious. And you're like, I just saw this. Have you seen this? And you join with them. Obviously, you don't want your kids on screens. You want them off screens as much as possible. But it is something we can lean into, you know, in small moments as well.
Yeah. Not to demonize it, but to like kind of join them in their world. I mean, because that's what you're saying here with the thinking out loud, the play, all the play strategies is joining them in their world anyway. And so it, as you were saying in the beginning, like we can do this be playful at many different ages. And that is like joining, sharing attention. That's so cool. I love that. And then you also talk about mirroring, which is very, very similar. And this is like kind of like goes in this, you go into the difference between top down versus bottom up strategies. And I was wondering if you'd kind of explain, you know, what mirroring is, and then what are the difference between these top down versus bottom up.
Go for it, Georgie.
Yeah. So I was actually just rereading something Dan wrote years ago now, his book Mindsight, where he talks about like that there are neurons that are stacked up in the brain, and they're sort of like 6 neurons deep kind of thing. And when we are gathering, this is what our kids do in play. They really initiate play from the bottom up. So they're at the park and it rained the night before, and the sand in the sandbox has gotten all muddy and kind of murky and stuff like that. And for some reason they run to it when we want to run away from that. We know that we're going to have to hose them all down when it's all done and stuff. But kids, when they see that mud, when they see that wet sand, what's happening is the like stuff is lighting up from the, sort of the body to the brainstem to the, all those lower parts of the limbic system that are really like flooding their system with information that's coming in from the outside. So they're gathering all of this primarily sensory information. It's imagine those 6 neurons deep kind of lighting up in the brain one by one until they get to those like top level sort of thinking about, okay, well, how do I want to keep this play going? And who do I want to invite in? And what do I want to tell my parent about? And all of this stuff, which is a little bit more top down, how they're thinking and reflecting about their play, or how they want to communicate about it, or what they're learning and what problems that they're solving in it. And especially if something goes wrong in play, they're going to need the top down, the ability to sort of stay calm when they're under pressure, when that big block tower looks like it might teeter over. They're going to need to be able to decide, like, what do I do when my sibling comes over and it looks like they're going to knock it over, but it's already teetering anyway? Like, play is not always fun. A lot of times it looks like really hard work, and it looks like they have to think really hard in order to solve these, figure out these difficulties and these challenges that come up in it. So
Can I jump in really quickly, Georgie?
Yes, please add to
you
it.
Teach,
Tina.
like, make yourself a mirror as a strategy before you teach that. Just to be really clear about top down and bottom up. So top down is we're using the top part of our brain, which is our prefrontal cortex. And what it looks like is problem solving, a lot of language, a lot of narrating, decision making. So the think out loud strategy is pretty much a top down strategy. Now we're having to kind of tune in and use other kinds of things, but in general, we're kind of naming what we're seeing, and it's, we're really using problem solving, language, decision making, etc. top down. When we say bottom up, I love how Dr. Mona Delahook just really calls it body up. So when we're talking about, like, just how Georgie went through body, brainstem, limbic. So we're really talking about the subcortical structures. Everything below the cortex, which is the outer bark of our brain and our prefrontal cortex, is really the bottom up part. So when we're talking about movement and breath, like the way that we're breathing and kind of instincts, and like, they see the muddy sand and they want to go straight to it. And then there's all these sensory pieces that go with it. That's what we really mean when we're talking about bottom up. So, Georgie, will you explain, like, make yourself a mirror is a bottom-up strategy, because we really are using our body and our face on all the nonverbal stuff, which is also very right hemisphere.
Yes. So thank you, Tina. And I feel like I'm always learning from Tina. Like, I really want you to jump in and tell me, like, wait, Georgie, don't forget this part, because we spend a lot of time making sure that the book, like, comes across as if it's one beautiful flow of conversation with me and Tina, having wrestled with all this stuff and come up with a really easy way to, like, simplify it and make it palatable and practical for everybody. Your kid is playing something. There's a whole lot of stuff going on below the surface. Let's just put it that way. The bottom up stuff is all below the surface of their awareness, but it's most of what we use in our person-to-person relationships to really communicate what's important to each other, like the nonverbal stuff, the stuff that we're not even really aware that we're communicating. Like, if I am sitting with you and I hunch my shoulder in a certain way, or I cross my legs over, I sometimes do that really without thinking about it, because that might be how you're sitting in the chair. And our mirror neurons, these really specialized neurons in the brain, are firing when we're not even thinking about it, but we are sort of wired to feel connected, to feel like a felt sense of the other person that we're with. And so what we want to do when we use something like make yourself a mirror, which is the second strategy in the book, is to harness the power of what's going on below the surface, to be a little bit more intentional about it. So you might pick up on, while you're sitting with your kid, while you see them, in the sandbox, while you're trying to get them off the screen, whatever it is, you can use this anytime, really. There's all this nonverbal stuff happening between the two of you, and what you're sharing between your body, your facial expressions, and your vocal tone, or how you're using your voice. And we just want parents to know, like, you can use that stuff. You can pay attention to something that your kid is doing. So let's say it's the pace that they're hopping. It's like the way that they're hopping on the trampoline or something, or they're hopping like a bunny across the living room, something like that. And if you can capture some element in the way that you're, they're going to look at you and they're going to want to show it to you because they want to be mirrored. It's like a big part of their biology is like, hey, that's why they're constantly asking us to look at stuff. I'm ready to be mirrored. I want you to be there. I want you to be a participant in this. And so sometimes it's just as simple as, like, kind of matching. You don't even have to, we don't want you to copy them exactly. It's just kind of matching maybe the pace or the tenor or the look, or even the sound that they're using at that moment. And we're communicating so much in terms of our attunement with our kids. They're getting so much out of the nonverbal communication that's happening.
So like if my son's like, Mom, the guy's coming, he's coming down the rope, he's coming to find you, then I might be like, okay, I'm waiting for you, I've got you. And I would just match with my voice to join with that. Or one of my sons was obsessed with the Dodgers by age 3, and he would love to play baseball in the backyard. He had a little juggling pin that looked like a bat because he couldn't hold a big bat. He was so tiny. But every time he would go to bat, he probably saw a baseball player do this. He would tap the bat 3 times and pretend like he was spitting. And so he wanted me to pitch to him all the time, right? So it's not like we're sitting on the floor. We're necessarily like playing its playtime in the playroom. We're just throwing the baseball in the backyard. Or it might be that we're in the car and well, I'll come back to that in a minute. But so he would tap the bat 3 times, pretend he would spit. So I'm about to pitch the ball. So I would pretend like I tapped 3 times and I would pretend to spit and I'd be like, ready, batter? Whatever. So we're just kind of joining with them either with body, face, or voice. Probably, like Georgie said, not doing all 3 and mimicking because copying can be really annoying. But even if you're in the car, again, this is back to like, yes, it's what we do when we play, when we're playing with our kids, but it's also, we call it the way of play because it's a way of being with our kids. It also means when we're in the car and our kid makes a silly noise or a silly face, we make a silly noise or we make a silly face.
Mm-hmm.
Or if our kid kind of like does something in the bathtub, you have the guy dive in under the bathtub too. So we're really following along and mirroring what they're doing. So these 2 strategies that we've talked about, thinking out loud, kind of narrating what we're seeing and what we think they're happening, mirroring with our body, face, and voice. Like you can see how this can be done, whether we're pretending that we are hot dog vendors at the baseball stadium, or we've got super guys saving people on a pirate ship, or if we're just riding in the car. Mm-hmm. And they use a silly voice when they're singing, and then we join in with the silly voice too.
But also, it's interesting because this is like all the best stuff. This is universal to any relationship.
Yes.
Like this is what you would do with your partner. If your partner started to make silly faces at you, you might like make silly faces back and play together and play in. And like this is definitely a play strategy that I use like with my teenagers who are
Totally.
One's about to turn 18. We're still doing some of these things. But I also was thinking of, as you were speaking, this kind of synchronization and how being in tune with people just feels so good. So one of the things I do that I love is Scottish country dancing. I'm obsessed with it at this point. But like that's one of the things we do is like we are, setting to each other, or we're turning at the same time, or 2 parts of the dance are turning at the same time, and we're all in sync in this rhythm and that attunement, and that feels so good. So we can just harness this universal thing that feels really good and is so connecting when we want to connect with our kids, just to kind of, I guess it just takes a shift in mindset, right? Like it must take like a shift from, there's got to be a space, I guess, maybe, I don't know, maybe there's like a minute where you sit in the car and you just breathe and you don't do anything. Maybe sit in quiet for a minute to kind of release what was going before, to kind of get yourself into a mindset of connecting and play. That's probably even especially key for all of these strategies.
Yeah, and we have to keep in mind too, and we haven't yet gone here, is that, and this is based on Jock Panksepp's work, who did a lot of, known as the rat tickler, who measured how much rats play and actually laugh. I know it's really strange, but
the rat tickler.
And many other pieces of research that really show that the state of being, when we are playing or in playful states, it is neurophysiologically incompatible with threat states. So when we are in a threat state where we're reactive, right? We flipped our lids, we're dysregulated, we're angry, we're fearful, full of anxiety, panic. Those states, if you're in that state, you cannot play, and you cannot be playful. So that's one thing we can kind of put a pin in and come back to, which is because sometimes as parents, we are feeling that way. We can't get to playfulness in those moments. So we can talk about what we do and how we get there. Yeah. But what's important about this too is that everything that we're talking about here, our kids enjoy it. They're building tons of skills. It builds the relationships. But you know what else it's doing? It is creating some Teflon against threat states. It is a protective factor against threat states, because play itself and playfulness are huge cues of safety. And And so it's such a powerful way to help move a kid from a reactive state into a receptive, regulated, safe, safe cues of safety state. But it's also a way to prevent that from happening. So especially if you have a kid who might be feeling nervous about something or anxious about something, that is really a key time to bring in some laughter and playfulness and silliness. Sometimes that means you playing the boob and tripping all over the shoes to get out the door. It might mean bringing some playfulness in terms of telling a story. So I use this a lot because I have parents that tell me this and I get this, like, I don't want to do an effing puppet show to get my kids to put their shoes on and get out the door. I'm so tired. I don't want to do it. But the amount of energy and time we put into the battle is actually far harder.
Yeah.
And the more we practice being playful, our brains are plastic too. It becomes more natural and automatic for us. But one of the best ways I ever got cooperation in the car, but also to get the kids to transition to something was, and I was so bad at it, but I would be like, okay, I haven't even told you guys the story. There were these 3 squirrels and they did something they were not supposed to do. And they got in so much trouble. You're not even going to believe it. Now, I don't even know what the heck's going to happen next. I don't know what the squirrels did. I don't know what that getting in trouble means. Maybe I'm not even going to be giving a good moral message. I don't know yet. But if I start that way and then I'm like, get your shoes on, grab your bag, and let's get in the car. And then I'm going to tell you what happened next. They can't wait to get into the car. Yeah, they can't wait to get into the car. And you're going to make it up. The story might suck. Who knows? And if they're like, Mom, this story is stupid, you're like, okay, well, what do you think should happen next? Right? So it can be clunky. And at night, I would often make up stories and they'd be like, can you make the story more interesting? This is really boring. But I was like, well, I'm trying to help you go to sleep. So I'm trying to make it boring on purpose. The sea otters can only float for so long. You can only describe floating sea otters for so long before they're like, can you just get a little action going here? But so it's not just being in a playroom with a board game out. This is a way of being playful around eliciting cooperation. There's whimsy there. There's something unpredictable happening. We don't know, and what happens is it activates curiosity, which is a huge piece of play. And when kids are curious, that also is a protective state against reactivity and flipping their lids. So these are the kinds of things we're doing. And what happens then is your kid has also just gotten a rep, just like when you lift weights and you do reps, you build muscles. Your kid has also just gotten a rep of getting out the door quickly and efficiently without a battle. Okay, well, that's nice. Let's keep practicing that. So that becomes the regular normal. I mean, I think when you're talking about anything, like, and if parents are like, I'm really, dinner times are so stressful, bedtimes are so stressful, or we're having problem with this particular behavior, I really always want to bring it back to what are the repeated experiences we want to provide that help build that skill so it's automatic, right? So your kid is toilet training and there's a special basket of just bathroom toys that makes them excited to go into the bathroom, or maybe you give them an M every time they use the toilet, or whatever you do. Eventually you don't have to do those things because it becomes a natural rhythm of what they do, right? And so
you put the effort in the front end, you're saying.
Exactly.
Like it takes some effort, but then it pays off because it gets easier and easier as time goes on.
Totally.
Yes.
And the more joy we have in our interactions with our kids and the fewer battles we have, the fewer discipline problems we're going to have as well. They're going to be more cooperative, and then we're going to enjoy them, and we're not going to flip our lids as much. Like, it's so good for the relationship too. So I will say that if you as a parent are feeling like I can't get to playfulness because I'm so anxious or I'm so stressed out, what I want to say to you is I get you. I feel that. I felt like I was, especially when my kids were younger, I was so overstimulated all the time. I was just like a walking, flipping my lid person. I yelled a lot at bedtimes. And I think what I would say to you is more than ever, you need play. That's a cue. If you're feeling like you can't access that, it means you need time probably away from your kids. You need to go have dinner with your friends, or you need to go for a walk with a friend, or you might need to go to the bathroom by yourself for once. There are just some basic things that you need. But the more we kind of join with our kids in the silliness of play and let go and just practice it, even if it's clunky, it's stress relieving for us too. It really is.
I love that. I love it. I'm aware that we only have so much time. You guys have 7 strategies, which are amazing. I really would love to just kind of touch on the strategy number 4, which is dial the intensity up or down. So, I mean, I can understand parents wanting to dial things down and really wanting those strategies, right? But you also have dial things up too. So can you tell us a little bit about this strategy too?
Go ahead, Georgie.
Yeah, no, what I would share about dialing intensity, it may be different than what Tina shares because we each of us have our own stories about like what the work that we've done with families, but also how it came out for us with our own kids. So I have a 10-year-old son, and when he was little, he had a speech delay. So I have a neurodivergent child, and his play didn't look like what I was expecting. He was the kid that everywhere we would go, he would find the biggest stick, like just like a fallen tree branch or something, sometimes 10 times bigger than him. And he would hit everything with this stick. And I was like, oh my gosh, my kid's going to be the most aggressive guy as he gets older. But it turns out he had some tactile defensiveness, like he was defensive in his tactile system. So he didn't want to go touch everything. His stick was like his way of like, I'll touch it, but I don't have to I can be 10 feet away from it. So he literally would touch it with a 10-foot pole. And so he was kind of inspiring what has now become dial intensity up and down, because we would go to occupational therapy and the OT would say, Jack, is it okay if you maybe try that medium instead of really, really hard? And so I was learning how to help him instead of saying, stop, put that down. I don't want you to use that stick. Like sometimes we have a tendency, I think for me as a mom and other parents as well, of like, I just need to stop that and like put a pin in it because I don't want my kid to keep going in that direction. But really there might be an underlying need that they have or a way that they're experiencing their sensory world that we don't fully understand yet and that we're still discovering with them. And if we put a pin on that behavior, we may not ever really understand where that's coming from. And Tina has taught me, more than anybody else, you have to chase the why behind the behavior as well. So dialing intensity is really about how can I help them gradually adjust the intensity, whether that be they're way too loud, rough, angry, hitting things, whatever. We don't want to let anybody get very, very hurt. But if the intensity is too high and there's some way that I can help them learn to adjust gradually instead of just put a pin in it, like adjust their level of sensory, maybe up regulation, or I'm way too high emotionally or something and it's not matching the situation. Let's imagine that there's like a big thermostat of their regulation and we can just kind of, you can't see my hands right now on this little screen, but if you could just kind of turn it a little bit in the direction that you want to see, so you're kind of matching them and then dialing it down. But Hunter, you asked, what are situations where we might need to dial it up too? And I think about getting my kid to do any kind of homework is where he completely becomes like a ball of jelly. Have you seen kids who are they'll melt down the chair, like under the table, and parents just think they're being defiant or resistant and they're trying to hide and they're trying to get out of it or whatever. But he actually does lose muscle tension and we see his intensity go way too low. So he's like on the low road, almost like what we talk about, fight, flight, or freeze. He's gone into kind of a freeze state where it's like, I literally can't do this. I saw a problem that I don't know how to do. And now I'm too low in my intensity and we need to kind of, start dialing it back up again so that we can increase his engagement and help him feel more confident in what he's about, the math problem he's about to do. Or maybe your kid just lost at a game. They were playing a board game with their siblings. Hunter, you mentioned Candyland earlier. Maybe the family's playing Candyland and they landed on the licorice swamp or whatever, and they're being kicked back like 10 squares and they're mad about it. And they go off and hide by themselves and nobody can find them for like a minute. And then you discover like they've hidden under the covers in their bed and they don't want to come out and they won't talk to you. And how often do we see that? We see that so often, not just in play situations, but like everyday family situations as well. So that kind of strategy can be really useful, whether we're talking about we're playing together and everything seemed fine and then all of a sudden something went wrong and they're not regulated enough in their body to be able to handle that. And then how do we get them to warm back up to that situation?
How do you get them to warm back up?
Yeah, I mean, we offer so many ideas about this, but one thing is to start low and go slow. So we don't want to come in at them and yeah. You don't want to come in at them and overwhelm them or be angry with them. Your really, really high intensity is going to overwhelm their really, really low intensity. And it's not going to facilitate the kind of safety in the moment that they're going to need in order to warm their systems back up and be able to re-engage. So sometimes just trying to get a handle on how much of me can they tolerate right now. I want to come in and help you. I want to know the right thing to say. I want to say the perfect thing to get you right back into what you were supposed to do. But sometimes gauging, like, can they handle just my quiet voice talking to them while they've got the covers over their head? Or is it that I need to like sit down at the end of the bed and then slowly creep a little bit and maybe have a little bit of a playful tone in my voice, something like that. We just don't want to give them too much of that playfulness. We don't want them to feel like I'm making fun of you now, like, oh, come on.
Or
This is just
distracting
silly
them.
times. Yeah. Or just distracting them, and we're not really mirroring them enough to give them the sense that we're really there and that we really understand and get that this is hard right now. So, or it might be like when my kid was little, I couldn't even go in the room. I would have to sit like right in the doorway and be like, I'm here. I'm just letting you know you might need some space, and then like inch a little bit closer and closer. And for us, the way that I dialed up intensity was sometimes I would like walk my fingers over kind of like this, and he could see it coming. And then if he like put the covers over tighter, then he wasn't ready. But then I'd walk my fingers back a little bit and I'd be like, okay, give you a little bit more. We're really embodying kind of the spirit of we can handle this because I'm flexible and creative enough to know how much of this you can take. So you can almost imagine that dial moving. Okay, we're going to click it up a little bit and dial the intensity up a little bit, maybe down a little bit when they're not ready, and give them the little bit more space, the little bit more time. But we're going to get there together. We're going to find that just right click where now they can come out from underneath the covers. They can hear you a little bit more. You can see that they're coming back in that sort of green zone of being able to be receptive to you again.
I think this is such an important strategy, because what it is it's basically coaching regulation. So just like when you're on the phone with a customer service person and you start to notice that you're getting a little too activated and you need to rein it back a little bit, or you're feeling really shut down. Like, we can think about it like you just mentioned, the green zone. We can think about this whole strategies around practicing regulation, that sometimes we need to move into higher states of activation of our nervous system, and sometimes we need to dial it back and have lower states. So if you think about the green zone as regulated, the red zone would be hyper aroused. This is where we see acting out behaviors, disrespectful tones of voices or words, slamming doors, physical and verbal aggression, behavioral stuff that we wouldn't want to see that's inappropriate, acting out. The blue zone would be the opposite of that, which would be more of a shutdown. And what we see here is more withdrawn, quieter, pulling away, refusal, maybe tears and sadness. So we talk about these sort of different states. And I want to just people throw out the term regulation and co-regulation a lot. And I want to just take 1 second to talk about this and define this. So Dan Siegel has my favorite definition of what regulation is. And it is the ability, and it fits in so much, Hunter, with your life's work and the mindful parenting approach. It's the ability to monitor and modify your state. So for me, when I need to regulate myself, I monitor. I'm noticing, oh gosh, I'm feeling really anxious right now, or I'm noticing I'm feeling really defensive and I'm kind of being too verbally aggressive in this conversation with my husband or whatever. So it's the ability to monitor, so notice, and then modify and be like, I need to take a minute, or I need to take a breath, or I need to move my body, or I need to go outside for a minute, or whatever it is. So co-regulation is the ability to monitor what your child's state is and help them modify it. So what this strategy is doing is, if your kid is withdrawn, shut down, pulling away because they're sad or they're disappointed or they're feeling flooded in some way, it really is about how we provide our presence, low and slow, maybe rolling a ball, toward them and hoping they roll it back. Or these little things or putting music on, these kinds of things that help them dial up their nervous system intensity to a place where they can re-engage and get back into relationship and joining. Or it might be that we need to kind of provide more comfort and quieter to get them to get more, less intense. So I think this is exactly how our children begin to practice, just like every other skill, the ability to monitor and modify their states in order to do what they need to do and be connected and engaged in relationships and with the world.
Yeah. These are all these strategies are so incredible for that emotional regulation, emotional knowledge, self-awareness, and I wish, of course, I had this when my kids were little.
Me too.
There's so much we could talk about here. There's 7 great strategies. You should definitely get it, dear listener. The way of play. Obviously, there's so much we could talk about. We have run out of time. Is there anything else that that you missed that you especially want to share with the listener before we go?
Yeah, I was thinking about this concept of practicing before the big event, like this idea that you wouldn't send your kid into a big soccer game, like the championship game, without doing a lot of practicing beforehand, right? So I constantly talk with parents and colleagues like play gives us the practice, play gives us the reps when your kid is already in the green zone for the most part, although we know that challenges are going to come up, and we even have strategies in the book about how to scaffold and stretch kids' skills when they need to build resilience or they have big anxieties about things and they're afraid of something that's coming up, or maybe they just struggle with their motor skills a little bit or something like that, and you really want them to be able to tolerate more frustration and things like that. We can do all that in play. Play means that they're getting a little bit more of a dose, like a regulated dose of practicing before they have to do it when the pressure's really on, when they have to get out the door and go to school and face all that anxiety walking through the front gate of their big school with all those kids and everything. So if we can practice those things and play offers us the opportunities to do it, why wouldn't we use that? And the book gives such like straightforward guidance and how to see those things and then how to make the most of these opportunities for more practice with play as a neural exercise.
My final thought, beautifully said, Georgie, is that kids need a lot more free time. Free play where they're just doing something on their own. They need a lot more time playing with their peers and their cousins and friends and neighbors and all of that. And they need more time playing with us, even in small doses. And what's incredibly powerful about it, I mean, I could say a million things about that, is that it really, Georgie, I think this quote came from you. It's so beautiful that what children won't say, they will play. If they don't say it, they will play it. And it's an incredible opportunity to dive into a whole world of our child, who they are. I mean, I think about the ways that I played when I was a kid are 100% who I am now. I'll give you an example. I loved playing teacher, and I had lesson plans, and I had seating charts, and I loved playing Julie McCoy, like the cruise director, and I'm 100% a cruise director. Like I love organizing and being on top of things. And when I played Barbies, I didn't play out the relational drama stuff. I designed Barbies rooms. I would find washcloths and pieces of fabric and design, and that's like my favorite thing to do. So I think, it really helps us know who our kid is, and it's an incredible opportunity to build skills even while we're doing that.
Yeah, yeah. Well,
now I wish I would have played with you as a kid, Tina. I would have had lots of fun.
Not too late, Georgie.
If we could have only been friends then.
It's never too late.
Yeah. Time for you all to go to a Ren Fest together.
Exactly.
Dress up.
Sure.
Play dress up.
And let me just say this too. I think play seems extra, but it's not. Your child, be militant about sleep. That's the one thing I would say. Be militant about sleep as a parent. Your child needs a lot more sleep than they're probably getting. Your child needs good nutrition. They need time in nature. They need, engaged relationships. They need positive, supportive, predictable relationships. Like, these are needs. Play is a basic need. It is crucial. In fact, and this is gross, but if you remove the cortex of a rat, and I'm not advocating anybody does that, the rats will continue to play. And what that tells us is that it's a subcortical part of our survival drive for life. It is a need, and it's something we should absolutely be protective of. Our children need more of it.
Amen. Amen, sister. I love it. We do too. Yeah. That's why I'm Scottish dancing. But The Way of Play is everywhere books are sold now. Thank you guys so much for coming on. It's been a pleasure. I really, really appreciate it.